Hello everyone and welcome to day 2 of the 6-week Affiliate Mastery Challenge. So today we're going to go over media channels, ad types, various traffic sources, and an all-important term called user intent. But before we get into that, I'd just like to recap what we did yesterday. So yesterday we covered some of the basics of affiliate marketing, so the various entities involved, things like mindset and the way you should approach things to actually be successful in affiliate marketing, and some of the basics of the internet. So what I want to advise now is that every day or after each module, you go on and assess the tasks and resources that I've given you and review the actual video and speed through it and take notes and review any points that you're a bit concerned about or found relatively new. And the reason I suggest this is because of the concept called spaced repetition. So essentially we forget things, but the more we repeat something, the less likely we are to forget it. Seems relatively straightforward, right? So have a look at this figure here. So what this figure shows is essentially your rate of forgetting things decreases the more times you actually repeat something. So at any point in time of this challenge, if there is something quite technical I go over or some relatively new concept which you think is quite important but was relatively hard to completely understand when I first introduced it, go back and actually review that part of the video and the resources. And if you do that several times, maybe the day after and at the end of the week, then you will be much more likely to actually remember that for the rest of time without much effort. So today we're going to talk about media channels, traffic sources, and various types of advertising that you can actually get access to on the internet. So what are media channels? Think of these as the form in which users actually digest content or the medium. So there's various media out there. I try to classify them, or they can be categorized into various broader sort of classes. The first one is traditional media, and traditional media are things like print, so the original forms in which you may encounter advertising, like books, newspapers, magazines, recordings, even CDs and vinyls, cinema, which is perhaps one of the more popular forms of traditional media advertising today. Whenever you go to the cinema, you'll almost always see ads before your actual movies. Radio, probably less popular these days. Maybe internet radio is kind of like a hybrid or a new age form of that. And of course television, where in fact a lot of money is spent on advertising. And then you get so-called new age interactive media, and a lot of this is through the internet, but you also get smart advertising in places like malls and dynamic billboards and things in subway stations. There's a lot of different ways you can advertise to people. And I kind of consider this interactive media because there's some interaction with end users that can generally be detected, as opposed to a billboard or a television ad where if someone has some emotional reaction on the other end, you're generally not going to be able to detect that, whereas on the internet you can detect like a click or some interaction with an ad unit. And smart TVs are actually a good example of a type of advertising which is increasing or becoming more mainstream at the moment. So many of you will have encountered smart TVs already where you can do various things on them, and ad formats are coming into the spotlight on those as well. Mobile is kind of like a medium of its own. So as a delivery method, mobile devices, it's all through the internet essentially, but the amount of ad units and the way in which that advertising can be delivered to people on mobile devices is so diverse that you can generally consider it its own medium. Now, outside of mediums, let's go on to the types of internet advertising that you might encounter. So there are many advertising channels that exist within all the different mediums of actually communicating with users. The most common is probably banners. So traditional display banners, just images on websites of different sizes and formats, generally on desktop. And then you get mobile display. Again, mobile is kind of like its own channel and medium and ecosystem. So these can either be on mobile sites that people are browsing on those devices, or in apps, and you can also get native advertising, which is kind of a big thing at the moment. Another type of internet advertising you may encounter is search advertising on Google, Bing, Seven Search, and so on. And you can almost guarantee that everyone on the planet almost has encountered a Google search ad. Email is another very common form of advertising, perhaps one that you won't encounter so readily because typically you have to make some initial commitment to a list or a subscription of some kind to receive email advertising. That's ignoring spam, of course, which no one wants to deal with and you should never touch. So with email, you get things like list building, list selling, cross-selling, and cross-promotion between lists, and so on. Now, pops or pop-ups are another common form of advertising, one that arguably is dying and is not necessarily worth a big investment into, but pretty much everyone has encountered a pop-up, right? And most people hate them. So you get pop-ups, pop-unders, tab-unders, various forms of windows popping in the foreground or background when you're browsing the internet. And there's various ways that these can be triggered, either by adware on your computers, on your computer, or through other means. You get direct navigation or redirect traffic, which is a little different. Then you have social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. They generally need no introduction. And then there's less traditional advertising approaches that are kind of becoming more and more common and even more traditional nowadays. So things like Vine and Snapchat and Periscope, where you may not necessarily have paid and sponsored ad units that you directly use to advertise, but those mediums themselves can be useful awareness and brand advertising tools to generate followings and people who are intently listening to some user or some brand or some person who can then be pushed towards certain actions at a later stage. There's also video advertising, so YouTube being one of the major ones there. You get video on native ad networks, especially on mobile apps, as a native ad format. So most people who browse YouTube on their phone or play games on their phone will have at some point encountered video ads that pop up and kind of stand in the way of them getting to some deeper part of whatever site or app they're using. And then you get sites where you can use video ads directly, so Facebook and Instagram, for example, where, like on Facebook, the video ad is an actual ad unit. Another type of advertising is content marketing, which is something which has become much more popular over the last few years. So you have traffic sources like Taboola and Outbrain, and these generally offer cross-promotion of rich content and have this kind of viral aspect to them. Another advertising or type of internet advertising you'll encounter is native advertising, which I've kind of mentioned a few times already. So native advertising is kind of like just that, native or intrinsic. So with new interfaces, new technologies, and new ways in which people actually digest and interact with content, there's always going to be new ways of actually advertising to people or injecting advertising into those experiences. So you get things like in-app interstitials, inset-based networks, sponsored apps, interstitial video, push notifications, all of these various types of things which kind of natively integrate into mobile and app experiences. Another type of advertising it's kind of like a broad category, but this thing called rich media. So rich media is just a broad category, and when this term is used, typically what people are talking about is the movement of the industry towards HTML5 and rich dynamic ads rather than static banners and flash banners. And you can kind of consider these like an ad unit where it's almost like a website inside of that ad unit. And within the rich media specifications, you get these things called rising stars, like billboards and film strips and sidekicks, which we'll talk about a little later. Another type of internet advertising is pay per call, which is perhaps the newest of all of the internet advertising types I've talked about, at least when it comes to how popular it is. It's been growing substantially over the last few years, and it mainly involves Google, these sort of click-to-call ads, but Facebook is kind of heading that way as well. So, aside from the internet advertising types, let's actually have a look at various banner ad examples and talk a little bit more about these traffic sources and specific ad types. So here are some examples of typical display banners, and perhaps this is all of the examples. This is quite a lot in there. So the typical ad sizes that you'll encounter in terms of display banners are the leaderboard, 7 to 8 times 90, skyscrapers, which are 120 or 160 wide and 600 high, the medium rectangle, 300 times 250, and the rectangle, apparently, 180 times 150. To be honest, the leaderboard and the medium rectangle are most certainly the most common that you'll encounter when you do display advertising. And when you get to the rising stars in the desktop display kind of category, there's quite a few there. And to be honest, I haven't really used these, and they all seem relatively interesting, but they kind of take a lot more investment in terms of how much creative input and investment you have to put in to actually make these ad unit types if you want them to actually be rich media rising stars. But here they are anyway. So you have the billboard, the film strip, the portrait, the pushdown, the sidekick, and the slider, all outlined here as you can see on this figure. And these ads, first of all, why do they exist? Why have we moved from banners towards rich media in these different formats? So it kind of comes down to web owners and the advertising ecosystem made by various advertisers wanting to optimize the use of space on websites. So no one would argue that the typical designs of websites have drastically changed over the last 10 years. Now, we kind of went through Web 1.0 where things were pretty ugly by today's standards, and we moved into more rich media type sites, and then lots of sites which kind of descended from WordPress themes and things. And now in this day and age, you have a lot of websites which are very creative and dynamic because the technologies that actually build websites or can be used to actually present some sort of interactivity and user experience to users are much more advanced. So the types of ad units that you would use obviously are going to evolve with that. So these rich media rising stars in the display banner space, they're better canvases for HTML5, so rich interactive ads. They're generally bigger, which gives you more space to actually do things. And studies have shown that they tend to actually give higher engagement. And this can be for a number of reasons. First of all, if something's different to what most people are used to, it's generally going to get more engagement from users and more interaction with users and a better response. But in terms of studies, people have shown that these kinds of ad units tend to give higher click-through rates. The time spent engaging with them seems to be higher. They cost less because of these changes in metrics, and they're just more attractive to the end user, right? Now, one thing that I should mention is this word engagement. I don't like it. So as a performance or direct response marketer, this word is kind of, it's nebulous and vague, and it doesn't really mean that much. So a user can be engaged. Great. They could be engaged on a scale from 1 to 687. Like, where do people lie on that spectrum? How does that correlate to how useful they are to me and their actual tangible value to me, how likely they are to convert? Hopefully you can see in that respect, this word doesn't really help you, the direct response marketer, that much. And in fact, the term, the actual definition of the term is quite poor across the industry. So there's a poor consensus there. And I've added some resources to this module about this concept, so you can check those out a little bit later. So moving on from that, let's talk about mobile display instead of desktop display, which we just talked about. So the standards for the sizes of mobile display banners are set by the IAB, the Interactive or International Advertising Bureau, which, if I didn't mention earlier, they kind of set the standards on what rising stars are, the definitions, the names of different ad units and different ad dimensions and so on. So they set sort of guidelines there to kind of regularized the advertising or the internet advertising industry. So when you go to mobile, a mobile display, the most common is 320 times 50 banner by far. And then there's multiple sizes which are shared with traditional display. So you have your 300 times 250, a medium square or rectangle. Yeah, it's not a square, a rectangle. And you have your 728 times 90 display ad as well. And then you get large interstitials, which are more common in mobile than desktop, like the 320 times 480, which is actually a common screen size. 1024 times 768, again, a common screen size. It's more tablet orientated. And within mobile display, you get rising stars as well. And of course, native ads, where native ads can kind of do whatever they want. So within the mobile display rising stars, you have the slider, the full page, the pull, which is sometimes called push, and this is not to be confused with push notifications, the adhesion banner, and the film strip. So these are all kind of interesting ad types which many of you have probably encountered on your mobile devices at some point in time. Now, again, I've shared some resources on these, so you don't actually have to try and remember all of these off by heart, and you may never even use them, but I've left the resources there for this module so you can actually review those to remember what those are, and you can look at this URL if you want to actually see the most up-to-date rising stars, because the definitions and the actual rising stars do kind of change over time. So I've mentioned native advertising quite a few times, so let's look at some actual examples of native mobile ads that you may encounter. So these ad types are basically custom formats that have been built by certain ad networks. They're generally controlled by something called a software development kit, or an SDK, which is embedded in an app by a developer or in a site. So you as an app or a site owner would actually work with some ad network, and you would take their SDK and embed it in your system so that it can actually deliver ads natively within the user experience that you're providing. This is what integration is, or this is called integration with ad networks. And again, these ad formats become native to your application. Now, AirPush is a great example of a native ad network, or an ad network that provides various native ads. And AirPush kind of has an interesting history. So people who've been in the industry a while will remember AirPush as being the company that did push notifications to people's phones, hence the name. And then there were changes in the legislation and the regulation over these, which kind of crippled them and almost destroyed their business overnight. But they've kind of risen from the ashes there, and actually now are one of the biggest and the kind of one of the nicest ad networks that you can work with. But let's actually just have a look at some of their native ad types. So you can go look at these directly on their website as well, but I'll just take you through a few of them. So there is the banner info type, which is essentially just a small banner across the bottom of whatever app you may be using. There is the abstract style ad, which, as you can see, is kind of an overlay over some app or something that you're using, which looks a little more integrated and unique and gels with the actual user experience more than this banner. There is the overlay info, which is kind of like an interstitial where it pops up some sort of banner or some dialogue over the top of what you're actually doing. There is the app wall info, which generally we would call this an app wall, which just gives you a selection of different apps that you can download or get involved with. So it's kind of like multiple advertisers or multiple ads within one unit that is served to a user. And aside from those ones I've showed, there's other ad types as well, which you can go look at, but things like in-app full landing pages, which pop over the top of what you're doing, where it's your own website just kind of popped over things, where people can just close that directly. There's notification types. There's always lots of innovation going on in the native mobile advertising industry, which is why it's becoming more and more popular to affiliates. Now, in terms of the ad types involved with these various advertising channels, which I've already gone over, so some more specifics here, When you get to search, which needs no introduction, most of the ad types that you'll encounter are contextual, so they're based on what you've actually been searching for, the keywords there. And you may get sponsored search results, for example, where those results rank at the top or amongst the top results, amongst the organic results. And then you can have ad units on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, which aren't search results at all. With most email marketing, you generally consider the advertising to be direct, like it is the newsletter or the email that you've sent people, and you might have links in there and so on, but that entire document is kind of the ad that you're using. But you can get things called solo ads, which are essentially ads which get placed within other people's email newsletters. Pop-ups, a dying traffic source, which everyone knows, loves, and hates. And then you get pop-unders as well, which are sneakier, where they pop underneath the window that you're actually using. In a sense, it's all a pop-up of some kind, however it actually may display to you. This industry is kind of dying for a number of reasons, but to highlight a few, ad block plugins in your browsers, basically killing off more of these as time goes on. And you have pop-ups and you have PPV. And with PPV, this is generally adware based and requires you to have something installed on your computer, like a terrible toolbar or something. You know, the things that your nana would probably have, or your grandmother would probably have on her Internet Explorer or something like that. And they're slowly getting thwarted more and more over time. Direct navigation is kind of in the same vein as pop-ups. And this is essentially where you load a site or you do something, and instead of going to where you want it to go, it actually redirects somewhere else. So it's kind of like, it's not a pop-up, it's you being routed somewhere else within the actual page or the tab that you're using. And this is called direct navigation, and it's a bit less blockable because generally your user action causes this to happen. So ad blocking something which the user triggered, which just to any plugin or any ad blocker just looks like you loading another page, is a bit harder. Now when you get to Facebook, virtually everyone uses Facebook, right? So everyone kind of knows the ad types there, even if they don't actually recognize that they're ads when they're actually being served to them. So there's a ton of different ads there, both on the right-hand side of your newsfeed and in the newsfeed, with variations depending on whether you're on desktop or mobile. I won't talk about these at all because we're actually going to go over Facebook much later in the course. When you get to Twitter, you have sponsored tweets. They may even have other ad types now, I'm not even sure. Twitter is kind of one of those traffic sources where it's harder to get into, but then when people do test Twitter, they tend to find it performs worse than the other advertising channels that they're using, and so its popularity is often declining despite their best efforts. But don't discount Twitter, there's always going to be someone making money there. Now with Instagram, Instagram has only recently become a traffic source that affiliate marketers can use. So Instagram, being owned by Facebook, is now part of the Facebook ad network. So if you have a Facebook account, you can actually attach an Instagram account and advertise on Instagram directly through Facebook. Pinterest is another good example. Pinterest is a huge site, especially for certain demographics. And the ad types there, well, initially there really weren't any ads. People were trying to make money there by being a user and posting images, having people follow them, and just having links in their actual images and things like that to push traffic off site. I believe now they have sponsored ads in stores of some type. I'm not entirely sure, but it's not really a mainstream source. And to be honest, I haven't heard of anyone really cracking Pinterest. And this is probably because the ad types that they allow and the advertisers that they allow into their platform are kind of quite regulated. But on the bright side, the average revenue or purchase, the amount of money that users referred from Pinterest actually spend on retail sites is generally quite high. It's generally higher than Facebook and many other sources. So it is potentially a great traffic source for certain demographics and for certain verticals. Video. So video is an absolutely huge entertainment medium, and it should come as no surprise that YouTube actually does more volume than any other site on the planet in terms of actual internet bandwidth. I think there's something like over 6 billion hours of video watched every single month just on YouTube. And within YouTube, there are a lot of video ad formats available. So there's in-display ads, which appear inside search results. There's the in-stream ads, which you probably find the most annoying, which come at the start of every video, and it takes a while before you're allowed to skip them. There's call-to-action overlays that can go over videos. There's companion banners, which can go on the right-hand side of the actual site, alongside some sort of video, and so on and so on. There's actually a lot of different ad types in there. Another form of advertising you'll encounter is content marketing, like Taboola and Outbrain, which I mentioned earlier. But more generally, you get things which are very article focused. So things like you'll encounter on Facebook, where there's this article that's been shared where it says something along the lines of, some sort of very specific headline template which just works, and they know it works. Like, she gave something or other to a homeless man. You won't believe what happened next, or you have to see what happened next, or I completely lost it at 2 minutes, or what happened at 37 seconds was amazing, like all those kinds of things. These tend to have very clickbait type titles and really appeal to going viral. So these are the things that just do go viral. So this is highly digested content which is very headline driven. You get a lot of sharing, a lot of social proof and social sharing, and people sharing it with friends and tagging each other. And this kind of dynamic has helped companies like Upworthy and BuzzFeed and sites like Viral Nova become absolutely huge. I think the guy who built Viral Nova sold it for tens or hundreds of millions of dollars at some point in recent history. And then you get sites like Taboola and Outbrain, which basically allow you to promote content from other people's sites. So you might have some blog article, but then at the bottom you have links to other blog articles and other sites and other content. It's essentially cross-promotion of media that appeals to the people who are already digesting this media and reading these types of articles. So this is probably a bit much. Like, I've probably talked enough about various ad types and things, but we're really only scratching the surface of what kind of advertising you can do on the internet. The amount of things available to you, the amount of ad types, the amount of ad channels is really just absolutely stupendous. And the ad types that you can actually use can be universal, or they can be specific to the type of medium or the type of traffic source that you're using. And it's great to just have a general understanding of what's actually out there and kind of vaguely know about the different media channels, the different types of traffic, the different types of ad units and things like that. Because again, we're kind of building a fundamental broad knowledge and a broad skill set to help you in your affiliate marketing endeavors. Now, in terms of actual traffic, where most traffic can be measured in terms of like impressions or views of an ad, in terms of who actually provides a large number of impressions and the largest amount of advertising inventory and volume on the planet, there are several big players. So Facebook is kind of an obvious one. Almost everyone's on Facebook. They have ads all over their social platform, although they do try to limit the amount of ads that users see because Facebook values user experience more than anything else. That aside, they generate about $2 to $3 billion in ad revenue per quarter. Google has various advertising properties in real estate. So they have search, they have YouTube, they have the Google Display Network, which is banners and various things. Compared to Facebook, they actually do a lot more revenue. Google is huge, and they're actually a publicly traded company, which means you can look up this information directly. And if you do look up this information, and here's just a slide showing the information I looked up recently, you can see that over the last quarter, they've essentially done close to around $17 billion in advertising revenue, which kind of dwarfs Facebook a bit. But to be fair, the various advertising properties that they own can kind of be a bit more focused on advertising. They have more of them. They have a broader user base, so that's only fair. But Google essentially does 17 billion in ad revenue per quarter. Now, aside from those big solo players like Google and Facebook, the next biggest market or channel I would think would be general display and banner space and the type of advertising you get through media buys. So typical banner space on websites is actually managed by a lot of exchanges and networks. So you get companies like Rubicon, OpenX, DoubleClick, Smarto, exchanges that actually control or access a lot of the banner space across websites all over the internet. Now, in terms of the largest players there, I don't think there's actually an authoritative list out there. But if you were to kind of do your research here, you'd find various big players. And I found a list which is kind of convenient from Quantcast, which I'll show you now. So you can see Rubicon is listed as the top here in terms of the actual number of people that are reached. You have other ad exchanges there which are well known, like OpenX and AdBlade and so on, but there's various big players that aren't included there. So AppNexus, for example, DoubleClick, Right Media, which I believe is now called the Yahoo Ad Exchange. But in any case, it doesn't really matter too much who's the biggest player here, because whenever you're doing banner and web advertising, typically you work with a lot of exchanges and a lot of different inventory management systems, because you want to get access to a lot of stuff and no one owns all of it. And then stepping back toward you as the affiliate and the type of platforms you would work with directly, you get real-time bidding platforms like SiteScout and Bonanza, which aggregate traffic from a lot of exchanges and might connect to Rubicon and Smarto and to various other exchanges and ad networks. And they're kind of the places where you would purchase ad inventory in a more flexible manner. But I'll talk about those a bit later, not right now. So we will learn a bit more about those kinds of ad platforms. But for now, let's just have a look at some of the basic ad networks that exist. So again, there's no authoritative list, but if we go to a site like SimilarWeb, for example, we can look at the ad network category and we can see various players there. So if you go to SimilarWeb and you go to the ad network category and look at worldwide, you can see OnClickAds.net is number one, and then AdCash and Your Ad Exchange, and then various others there that are relatively well known. Now, if you look at some of these ad networks and actually click on them and look at their actual rankings and some of the data on them, for OnClickAds, for example, you can see they have close to 1 billion measured visits, and this is just through SimilarWeb. How accurate this is, no idea. It's probably an underestimate. And in terms of the actual banner space on websites and the number of impressions available, this is actually very small. If you look at AdCash, you can see it's at about half, and down to YourAdExchange.com, 315 million. So these platforms deal with a lot of different, impressions and serve banner traffic to many countries around the world. If you go down to traffic by countries for whatever site I'm on, I think this is on Your Ad Exchange, you can see that the traffic is primarily Brazil, Turkey, India, Mexico, Russia. So these top four are very high populous countries, but you can kind of see that Latin America, India, and Turkey dominate their traffic or are the major players there. So every different ad exchange and ad network and site will have regions in which they have a lot more traffic than others. But again, there's no authoritative platforms which actually control the largest amount of, or the predominant amount of inventory on the planet. Moving on from general display and banners, you get pops and redirects. With pops, there's easily billions of monthly impressions within this type of traffic. So if we go take a look at some of the statistics from ZeroPark, here you can see almost 30 billion in monthly redirects listed, with a lot of volume coming from Brazil, United States, India, Russia, so various countries there. Billions of impressions and from redirects and pop-ups. So this is kind of like a traffic medium which is slowly getting less popular over time, and arguably the amount of volume slowly going down, but there is still a ton of volume there that you can use. Now, with mobile banners, the ecosystem is kind of the same as desktop and typical banners, where in this case, you have app and site placements. It's all kind of managed by various ad networks and exchanges and real-time bidding platforms. No one exchange or company owns, a a huge chunk of the actual available inventory or impressions. It's just spread out over a lot of different exchanges. And again, you have app and site placements and you have native ad networks. And if we go to another site, in this case Pocket Math, and we look at their actual Explorer to show some of the inventory they have, the results are kind of quite remarkable. So just on their platform alone, they have access to about 13.6 million different sites, apps, and placements, and serve over 30 billion impressions per month, I believe. Sorry, this is per day. See, 30 billion per day versus 30 billion per month with the pop-up and redirect source that we looked at. And that covers almost 250 countries and over 20 exchanges. So there's just an insane amount of traffic there spread out all over the world over so many publishers. So really you wouldn't say, okay, you might say that the actual advertising space there is very fragmented, but essentially there's just such a huge amount of choice and so many different platforms, exchanges, and sites involved that it's really just an ecosystem of its own. Now, as for specific traffic sources that you can actually be involved with and advertise on, I won't list them here because there's really just so many and it'll be very boring for me to just say, here's this source, here's that source, as boring as I probably already have been. But what you can do is check the resources section associated with this module, and I'll provide a list of various traffic types and sources, and I'll highlight some of the ones which are better introductory platforms for you to actually join. So in terms of these traffic sources that you can join, how do you actually fit in there? What can you actually do? So many high volume sources tend to have barriers to entry that will limit how applicable they are to you and how readily you can actually get involved with those. But to be honest, most of the traffic on the planet is freely available to buy. There's nothing stopping you from, for example, advertising on Facebook or advertising on YouTube or Google AdWords, or joining some real-time bidding platform such as a mobile DSP that may have access to 30 billion impressions per day and over 20 exchanges like the statistics I just shown. There's very little stopping you actually doing that. So you can advertise on some of the biggest sites on the planet with very little barrier to entry. And that's one of the reasons why affiliate marketing is so attractive, or at least paid affiliate marketing is so attractive to so many people, because while there is all these barriers to higher level stuff, to actually get started, besides needing money and direction, there's so much, there's almost unprecedented access to inventory that you can actually try and monetize.